Okay, let's just start with a really uncomfortable truth. One that explains why billions of dollars in advertising just get completely ignored every single day. See, it all comes down to this fundamental misunderstanding of how our brains actually make decisions.
Here's the reality of who you're marketing to. They are overwhelmed. I mean, think about it. They've got 1,000 tabs open, both in their browser and in their brain. They are definitely not sitting around carefully weighing the pros and cons of your product versus your competition.
Just think about your own behavior for a second. You're scrolling through a feed, you're juggling emails, you're trying to make a split-second decision in a crowded supermarket aisle. We are all living in this low-attention world, and we're just making snap judgments to survive. And this, right here, is the critical mistake that so many brands make. They lead with logic, with specs, with a list of features. And they assume their audience is leaning in, just ready to be persuaded by a rational argument. But in most cases, that audience isn't even really listening. So, if logic so often fails, then how does persuasion actually work? Well, psychology gives us this brilliant framework for understanding it. It turns out our brains have two very different modes for making decisions. It's called the Elaboration Likelihood Model, or ELM. Now, elaboration sounds fancy, but it's just a term for how much mental effort you're willing to put into hearing a message. Are you thinking hard, or are you kind of just coasting? The answer to that one simple question changes absolutely everything.
So this model gives us two distinct paths. First up, you've got the central route. This is your brain's high-effort analytical mode. And then you have the peripheral route, which is the brain's low-effort shortcut mode. Every single marketing message you see is trying to appeal to one of these two routes.
Okay, now take a look at this. This is a perfect example of the central route. It's an ad from Capital One. What do you see? It's a chart. It's literally asking, how does your card stack up? It's throwing numbers at you. 1.25 miles per dollar, 0 annual fee. It's inviting you to do a side-by-side comparison and actually think. This ad only works if you're willing to do that mental work. And now, look at the complete opposite. This Jameson ad is pure peripheral route. Notice what it's not doing. It's not telling you about the distillation process or the price or the type of grain. No, instead, it's giving you all these peripheral cues. The rich color, that smooth curve of the liquid, and just one powerful word, smooth. It's selling a feeling, a vibe, not a feature list. So this is the crucial question, right? What determines which route our brain takes? Well, the switch is a concept called involvement, and it's basically just how much a decision actually matters to us. For that high-effort central route to even open up for business, 3 conditions have to be met. First, motivation. Do I actually care about this? Second, ability. Do I have the knowledge to even understand what you're talking about? And third, opportunity. Do I have the time and the mental space to think it through right now? If the answer to any single one of those is no, our brain just defaults straight to the peripheral route. Let's make this super real. High involvement decisions are the big ones, like buying a car, choosing a mortgage, or picking a surgeon. You know, they're expensive, they feel risky, they're personal, so we naturally switch on that central route. Low involvement decisions, that's buying gum, choosing a beer at the bar, picking up paper towels. They're cheap, they're routine, they're fast. That is prime territory for the peripheral route. And this brings us to this fantastic concept called satisficing. It's kind of a mashup of the words satisfy and suffice. See, when our involvement is low, our brain isn't trying to find the absolute best option out there. We're not optimizing. We are just looking for an option that's good enough to get the job done so we can move on with our day. Good enough becomes the goal. Okay, so this is where all that theory becomes real strategy, because if you can figure out whether your customer is in a high or low involvement mindset, you can finally design a message that actually has a chance of landing. Think about it. For a high-involvement product like insurance, the winning strategy is to give people strong arguments and data. You have to win on logic. But for a low-involvement product like beer, it's the exact opposite. You win with peripheral cues, brand identity, a cool label, a feeling of belonging, the whole vibe. Mismatching your message to your customer's mindset is pretty much the #1 reason marketing fails. This is the core takeaway right here. It really doesn't matter if your product is objectively the best on every single metric, if your message is too complicated for a low-involvement moment, or it's too flimsy for a high-involvement one, it just won't be processed. And a message that isn't processed is basically invisible. Now, this has massive implications for building a brand, because the route you use to persuade someone actually determines the kind of brand loyalty you create. So when you win through the central route, when someone has carefully considered all your arguments and decided you are the best choice, you build strong, stable, really resilient loyalty. It's like building a fortress. But when you win through the peripheral route, that loyalty is fragile and temporary. Just think of a brand like Coca-Cola. For over a century, they've masterfully built an empire on peripheral cues. The color red, the feeling of happiness, togetherness. It works for sure, but that loyalty is fleeting. It has to be constantly reinforced, because it was based on a shortcut, and it can be replaced by a new shortcut tomorrow.
Now let's look at a brand that built an absolute fortress using the other route, the central route. This number represents their dominant share in a very specific, high-involvement market. That brand is Sensodyne. They own a staggering 65% of the sensitive toothpaste market. But how? Not with flashy ads or celebrities. They won by being the #1 dentist-recommended toothpaste. That is a classic central route strategy. It's a logical argument based on expertise and credibility, and it's targeted at people who are highly motivated to solve a painful problem. They built a fortress, not a house of cards. All right, let's lock in the most important takeaways from all of this. First, just remember that people don't always think. A lot of decisions are pretty much mindless. Second, logic, that central route, it only works when people genuinely care enough to listen. Third, for most daily decisions, we're all relying on mental shortcuts, the peripheral route. Fourth, while cues are great for grabbing attention, it's the arguments that build real conviction. And finally, the most important rule of all. If your message requires thinking but your customer isn't, you will lose every single time. So, we understand the two roads of persuasion. The real question for any marketer, any leader, is this. Which road are your customers on? And are you actually meeting them there? Because designing the perfect message isn't just about what you say, it's about how the person on the other end is wired to hear it. And getting that right is the difference between being persuasive and being totally ignored.